From game day to signing day, breaking down every snap and all the news on Alabama's top football recruits. It's time for Crimson and Blue Chips with your host, John Garcia Jr.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. It is a Wednesday edition of Crimson and Blue Chips. I'm your host, John Garcia Jr., and today's program is pretty much all over the place, off script to some degree. We'll talk about this Alabama quarterback win. We'll talk about Alabama football recruiting with multiple commitments in the last 2 weeks, and we've seen several of them in action in person over the last week or so, 6 of them to be exact. We'll break down most recent developments in their games, from new commitment Malachi Moore to some of the longest tenured verbal commitments on the current Alabama commitment list of 2019 as well as 2020. We're going to switch it up a little bit though. We're going to look back at the question we had for you. We did it on Twitter at CABC Pod. Got some interesting results. It's a discussion topic that we're very curious about, so we'll dig into that one. It is recruiting related this time as opposed to team related the time prior. And then to you in our original format, how we close each and every program here on the podcast with listener Q&A. We've got email questions, cabcpod@gmail.com. We've got the usual Twitter questions at CABC. So fun stuff to get to, all for you right here on a Wednesday edition of hashtag CABC. Last week was pretty busy for us on the podcast, expanding to 3 shows a week, and thank you for all the support there. But hitting the road at the same time. But that's the beauty of football season. That's the beauty of our show. It is mobile. It will continue to be mobile, hint, hint, with the season underway or about to be underway level. And what we were doing in between the shows was checking out a bunch of Alabama commitments. Of course, we were there primarily to film a commitment video, and you've seen it by now. It was Malachi Moore. To that in a little bit, but I want to begin with the Bama commits I saw with a guy who probably isn't getting talked about really at all in the recruiting world. He committed pretty early, and he's been really solid. So that's kind of been that in terms of the perception surrounding King Muta, the defensive end outside linebacker prospect, 4 stars, out of LaGrange, Georgia, Troup County High School, same high school as Reuben Foster, the first 3 years of his prep career. But yeah, I feel like people in the Bama community aren't really talking about him much. He's made a bunch of visits to Alabama. He's recruiting his tail off for Alabama. And he's a pretty interesting prospect in his own right. So he certainly deserves a little bit more a conversation his way. About King, what I like about him in general, first of all, he's his own man. Like, he is not, no disrespect. We've had interviews on this show where kids are just straight down the middle, right? I mean, they're not going to budge an inch. But for us, not as fun. And King is a fun guy to talk to. Super honest, outgoing personality, which is making him a pretty good recruiter. And he fancies himself the prankster of the big group chat that all the Alabama commitments are on. But it makes him a good interview as well. And in terms of what he said about himself, football-wise, we watched him in a scrimmage against Northview High School, 2 quarters of him in action, and he was playing stand-up outside linebacker almost the entire time. So I thought that was interesting because the last few times I've seen him, he had his hand in the dirt, screaming off the edge as a traditional pass. When we saw him, he was standing up, he was running in space more, really a part of his game that I thought was frankly a weakness compared to what I'd seen in the past. And he bought right into that. He said, yeah, I need to get better at this. That's why I'm playing it. Stand up in the 10th grade. And then last year he was hand in the dirt almost full time, but this year back to stand up, and he thinks that's more prevalent to where he's going to play at Alabama, which is obviously something that is you kid who understands that and is trying to get ahead of that. You salute their coaches as well for allowing that to happen, and he knows he needs to get better. And he said that's the primary reason why he was working there so much during that scrimmage. And I think he'll flirt back and forth senior depending on down and distance and what Troop County needs. Now, they've got some good defensive prospects. They've got a defensive lineman committed to Auburn and a couple of FCS type guys as well. So depending on down and distance, what they need, he can work. But I mean, how can you not love a kid who's outgoing, funny, a big recruiter, good personality, good interview, and is willing to work at something that he kind of laughs at himself about. He said, look, I need to get better. My footwork kind of sucked. Those are some of the quotes. So he really wants to work in the space department, and that's something that we got to see him do. And look, he's still kind of right. He's got a ways to go moving laterally, being assigned to cover tight ends, backfield, getting his hands on rerouting a slot receiver, what have you. He's got a ways to go with that. But again, 6'4", 235 pounds, he's going to be moving forward more times than not. So him getting outside of his comfort zone will certainly help him, and it'll be something he needs to work on moving. We all expect him to be more of a pass rusher. It's where he's most comfortable, and it's frankly where he really validates his blue chip status. Again, 4-star prospect, top 200 in the 24/7. And that's where he's home. That's where he shines most. And we got to see a little bit of it. He did come down off of the edge at times and affected the quarterback. He would have had 2 sacks if the quarterbacks were live, but they weren't. So we know he can do that, and he's good at that. But really, he wants to improve, which is something he thinks he's going to do a lot at Alabama. So I thought that was cool. We talk, position projection is everything, right? We talk about it probably on every single show that we produce. Willing to play somewhere else, willing to work on where maybe he's not as comfortable for me, is always a good story. It's always something I want to bring to the forefront, and that's the main reason we wanted to talk about King Muta first. I hope you enjoyed some of those images there that we were able to put on for you from last Thursday night, rainy night in LaGrange, Georgia, not far from Auburn, ironically enough. But King, good player, good recruiter, rock solid, and he graduated in December in order to enroll in January. He was at one point really considering a Miami official visit, but not going to happen any longer. He is super solid to Alabama. I think he told me 1,000,000% committed. So if you are a mathematician, that's very solid. Even in the game of recruiting where kids blurt out numbers all the time. I think I saw a kid the other day put out 180% committed. So, hey, to each its own. But King, I don't think from his perspective, is a guy that Bama fans need to worry about, despite being out of state, despite being coveted and consistently coveted by several other programs. Good there from the Crimson Tide perspective. Everything we saw was full pads, by the way, so that was cool. So obviously, scrimmage is the ultimate for us right now. It's really all we got in terms of game-like scenarios. So it was cool to be out there, county, and feel a game vibe. Even though it was exhibition and it didn't count, it's always good to be outside in a game type of environment because, man, 7-on-7 season, camp season, all of that stuff is great, but it's forever, and we just can't wait to get out in these elements. So I was really excited to get out in the rain on a Thursday. It was weird. I don't know if I'd ever seen this in all my years of football. I played 16 years, and I've been covering football since then. That's 10. I guess I've been in football, 2 decades plus now. That's kind of crazy. I'm getting very old. But they did the Pledge of Allegiance, but they didn't sing the national anthem for the season, and they didn't have the budget for it, or I don't know. But that was kind of weird. Producer Kev, let me bring in here. Just off the top of my head, has that ever happened to you? Because me and Jason Caldwell, who you know well, who works with us in the industry, like, wait, Pledge of Allegiance, but no national anthem? It's usually the other way around, and if there's a Pledge of Allegiance, there's usually a national anthem somewhere before the start of a football game.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of allegiance at a game. Now that I sit back and I think about my years playing, and then my years coaching, I don't think I ever heard of Pledge of Allegiance, to be honest.
Like Pledge of Allegiance, period, you're saying? Like not even
Not
before the
even,
anthem?
yeah, not even before the anthem. I'm not Pledge of Allegiance before a game. Now that
Well,
I think about it.
well, welcome to Alabama. Pledge of Allegiance, prayer, the whole deal before
Oh yeah,
the national anthem.
I've definitely had prayers before the game. I mean, growing up playing, we definitely had prayers before the game, but not Pledge of Allegiance. Not saying that that's not a cool thing, but
When's the
I
last
don't think.
time you did the Pledge of Allegiance? Because I had my hand over my heart and I'm like, oh crap, I haven't done this since like kindergarten.
Well, I mean, I spent the good majority of 10 years as a teacher, so every day during teaching, especially when I was in the elementary school setting, so we did Pledge of Allegiance every morning.
Yeah.
So
I wonder what percentage of Americans right now, off the top of their head, on the spot, could recite the entire Pledge of Allegiance. I'd put that number at less than 50%, I think. Really
yeah,
low. Especially
I feel like
the further removed they are from what, elementary school?
elementary.
Yeah.
My middle school days teaching, we didn't really do it, and then my high school years teaching, definitely we didn't do the pledge.
Yeah, so I wonder why is that? I feel like
I think that's one of those.
But
It's one of those like elementary school things they try to teach, but then as you get older, they remove it. Now my high school,
because they say under
days,
God, right? That was the whole deal.
Under God, separation of church, and that's not talk politics, but I think that kind of moves into that. But
yeah.
the high school years, part of them we did it because I was teaching special ed, and that was one of our things we were trying to teach the kids. So, little tidbits about my past and stuff like that. So
yeah, so we had the pledge, and then because you're standing obviously, and we're on the field, so we're already standing. But it was raining, so I had a hat on. The Pledge of Allegiance, hand over my heart, whatever, and then everyone's still standing. Nobody's putting their hats back on because it's raining. But we're waiting for the national anthem naturally. And did you start
getting the awkward guys looking at each other
so what are we doing?
Are we playing football?
Yeah,
what's going on?
And they even had I believe one of the schools ROTC to present the colors for the pledge. So you're like, okay, obviously they're going to stay out for the national anthem because that happens every time. So I don't know if they didn't have the CD of the recorded anthem, or nobody was willing to sing it, or maybe the singer canceled on them last minute. I don't know, but that was in a lot of years of football games. That was anyway. Everything was smooth. There were no protests or anything like that. It was fine, and we got a scrimmage in the books. But yeah, that was technically in Georgia, so I guess we could just blame it. So that was Thursday, and that was a good day. Friday was there were no scrimmages available in Alabama, and I was back in Birmingham. And there was a kid, if there's any kid that I really wanted to see on the Bama commitment within driving distance, obviously, it was Jason Jones. I mean, this is a kid in the class of 2020 who is already the #1 player in the state of Alabama. I think unanimously, certainly for us, at 24/7 on the 24/7 Sports Composite. He was a kid we really wanted to see because, first of all, 6'5", 6'6", 330. I mean, who wouldn't want to see that in action? But then you watch his tape, and he's really good on O-line. He's really good at defensive tackle. He's just blowing people. Every time we planned to see him this offseason, whether it was a camp, whether it was an event, whether it was a scheduled practice, a workout, whatever, for some reason, either our plans would get affected or his plans would get affected. So this is like the highest ranked kid ever who very few of us in the industry have ever seen perform in any live form or fashion, which is just rare in this day and age of so many events, so many camps, so many availabilities. So I was not going to be in Birmingham seeing Jason Jones in action. By the way, head coach of Calera High School, Andrew Zhao, former Alabama quarterback, and defensive backs coach who I spent a lot of time with and really enjoyed, Antonio Langham, Alabama legend. So I'll talk a little X's and O's, coverages, drops, things like that with an Alabama legend and a fellow DB aficionado. Of course, he's coaching the secondary at Calera High School. But really, I was there to see Jason. And we put up some video Tuesday at 24/7 Sports, and you can see some of it here. The kid, I don't know how well you can carry 330, but he carries it pretty darn well, especially considering he's just now going into his junior season. So 2 years of high school ball left to continue to work. Really wanted to kind of settle the debate. Is he an O lineman? Is he a D lineman? And I know we talk about Raekwon Davis a lot on this show, but remember, that positional debate raged throughout the 4 years that he was at Meridian High School. That debate while he was an Army All-American as a defensive lineman. We were still having that debate. And I have a feeling this is going to happen with Jason Jones because, one, he's a big, strong athlete who's good at both. So that's obviously required for this conversation. And two, he's got a position that might be going against the grain a little bit. Now, Raekwon Davis preferred defense, and he stuck with it, and it obviously has paid off and will literally pay off in the NFL one day. With Jason, it's the same way. He's very much more comfortable on that side of the football. He actually made a bold proclamation after we saw him. He said, "I will start as a freshman," and he's committed to Alabama, so he's saying he will start as a freshman at Alabama, but he didn't say at what position. And I messed by that because I think he's got more O-line qualities than interior defensive lineman. I will say that I thought the same about Raekwon. I'm on record with that a million times with our loyal listeners. You guys know that. Jason, I almost feel like that a little bit more. In high school, Raekwon was longer, a little bit leaner maybe than Jason. He was taller, 6'7", 6'8", however tall Raekwon Davis is. He's been that way since the first day I met him. But he was playing a little more on the edge, kind of a hybrid, D-tackle, D-end, whatever. Jones, much more compact, much more of a true interior defensive lineman on that side of the ball. And then on he can play tackle or guard. He plays left tackle at Calera because, look, he's the best lineman on the roster, in the school, whatever. Maybe even in the region one day. But I think at the next level, he could be a swing guy. I think he could. But as you see in the clips, pretty light on his feet, moves pretty well when he wants to, can get to the point of attack, can get to the second level, long arms, a lot of things that make you say, I did as an offensive tackle. So I think that conversation is going to go on for a while, but was really excited to see him, was very glad that I went down to go see him because it was worth it. I think for us, he validated his status as the #1 prospect in the state. The things we had were more about his true athleticism. Can he bend? How well does he move? Laterally, redirecting, things like that. And he showed that he could do all of those things. Whenever he wanted to get someone on the ground on offense or defense, he was pretty much able to do it. Let's bring Producer Kev back in here. Have you had a chance to check out Jason, and what do you think?
Yeah, I have. He looks good as an offensive lineman, to be honest with you, and I'm in the same boat with you. As I said, Raekwon Davis was an offensive lineman, even when he's at the All-American Bowl playing defensive tackle. I said, this kid's an NFL offensive lineman. And I think Jason, he looks really good playing offensive line. He does. His athleticism is up there. He moves very well for his size. Like you said, he doesn't look 330, but he definitely carries that well. He's put together very well. And his ability to get to the second level is very good as well. But then you get the kids that's on playing defense, and you can't, I guess if you're gonna have one of these kids that's stuck on playing defense and doesn't want to play offense, then I mean, look at the success of Raekwon Davis, adamant that he was a defensive tackle.
Right.
And
from the beginning.
From Jump Street, he said, "I'm playing defense. Don't even talk to me about playing offense." And here we are talking about him being a 3-and-done defense.
Crazy.
So yeah, I if Jones decides to go that way, I definitely think he could contribute on the defensive line. But I would really like to see that kid play offensive line at the.
Yeah, me too. And I think, I mean, it's just crazy with the parallels with Raekwon. You'll never guess who his favorite player at Alabama is, who his idol is right now on that Crimson Tide roster.
His right now that's there now. Is it Raekwon?
Of course it is.
Okay, I
It's
was
the
about to
guy
say.
who did
I
what
feel
he
like
wants to do pretty much to the T.
I felt like you were setting me up there, but I
No,
obviously had to be
it's Raekwon.
Raekwon.
You know, for maybe in this amazing world of human evolution that maybe he could do both. Maybe like Raekwon, he would have been great no matter what. I mean, some athletes are that gifted, but I'm always gonna wonder what it would have been like for Raekwon Davis, and no matter where Jason ends up, that question, may pop up again. You may always kind of wonder what could have been, but he's still got a couple of years left, and he did say if Nick Saban says, "Hey, buddy, come over to offense," he would listen. So he's stubborn about it and firm, but maybe not as much as Raekwon was. But as far as we know, I don't think down in practice on the offense, as far as we know. So who's to blame Jason for wanting to follow in that guy's footsteps? So good to see him. Good to see him stick by his guns too. I don't agree with him, but do you? Only he could know where he's more comfortable, and frankly, in watching that entire practice, including some of the stuff that wasn't on video, maybe a tad more effort when he was on defense. I don't know if he is coming to further that debate. I haven't been shy with him about it over the phone or over messaging, whatever. So maybe maybe that was by design. He's a smart kid, very coachable too, catching up other kids. So elements that you normally wouldn't see. That's I mean that's why you go to practice. That's why you go to the games. You can see highlights and they're great, right? His highlights will be great. He'll have great highlights, I promise. But when you want to find out how the kid is, you sit and talk with him. You spend time with him, and you watch him in his element when things are good, when things are bad, when he's being coached, when he's being praised, when he's being yelled at. You want to bring those elements, and I was very impressed with Jason in all of the non-physical elements of watching him, with his intellect, how he carries himself, how he communicates with his coaches and teammates. All important that we usually don't, we really don't talk enough about these things, let's be honest. But when you go down and see a kid, those are some of the elements that you can gather. Those are some of the data points, the eval points that you can kind of put into the kettle before you rank a kid and you say, hey, this is why he's the number one player. I left that practice feeling like we made the right call, even though we hadn't seen him as much as we wanted to. Definitely the number one player in the state for 2020. And I think for me, the number two guy for 2020 in-state is another Bama commitment, and he's the most recent one in Malachi Moore, who, of course, we saw with the Hewitt guys. I mean, Kev, where do we even go with this? We've talked a lot about Malachi Moore. You guys are probably tired about Paul Tyson here. Pierce Quick, no disrespect to my guy. We had them both on the show in the last few weeks. Not sure how much else we can put out there. It was good to see Pierce back in pads. I will say that.
Yes.
With the labrum, we hadn't seen him in pads since the playoffs, since they lost to Hoover. So that was good to see just visually, because we just hadn't seen that. We hadn't seen him work out, period, for several months. And then he came back kind of slowly. The opening obviously didn't get full gear because the state of Alabama sucks. And then, now we finally get full gear from Pierce, and he looked good, moving well.
He did look good. He looked good.
Yeah. Just kind of comfortable and ready, making all the calls. And he's another guy that he was going against when I was watching individual drills. He's going against a big overweight I assume, underclassmen. And Pierce is really spending time with this kid. I mean, they got up, and he's spending time on a guy who probably isn't going to play a lick this year for Hewitt Trustful. So you like to see that. You like to see guys kind of passing it down. Being captains. Pierce Quick is kind of the football captain, both privately and publicly.
Yeah.
That's who he is. Like who you hear, what you hear on the pod, and when he does interviews, like that's legitimately who Pierce Quick is.
He has those traits that you can't, like an film on an eval is you're not gonna find those traits out. Like those are the ones that you're looking for in a kid that is gonna benefit your program. You're looking how he deals with the underclassmen, how he deals with the coaching staff, and how he deals with being coached, and if he is coachable, and if he can help relay stuff to the younger kids, because being in a system for so long, and then you got young kids that if they can contribute, they might be able to contribute. They haven't been in the system, so they don't know it. And if you got a guy like Pierce who's passing along the knowledge and helping somebody get ready, like that's the stuff you can't see on film unless you're at practice or around the program. You're not going to see that, and I think that was cool to see. With him,
not a lot of 5-stars. I mean, a lot of 5-stars. Let's be honest. We're part of this. We're part of this. They're 5-stars. They're kind of big-headed, right? A little bit of deep, and it's whatever. Their name is in the headlines. They've got grown men and women, pretty much fawning over them. So it's normal. Right? It's normal. There's more 5-stars who act like that, like Pierce, which is unfortunate, but it's true, at least right now. So it's always good to see those things. I was actually going to think about this, Kev. That Hewitt Trustful offense is like breakneck speed. Right? I mean, they're freaking. Yeah. Their Twitter handle is Husky Fast, so they're going to go
Husky
fast. They're going to go fast in that spread, and they've got weapons all over the place with Javarius Johnson and Paul Tyson and Jalen Warsham, all these guys. How does obviously you're getting in more plays than the average line, and things seem quicker in terms of your assignment. You got to get to them faster, and maybe you don't have to sustain that block. But in terms of the communication, in terms of the play calling, pre-snap reads, and all that, what changes in an offense like that versus a pro-style offense, or even some of these gadget-type offenses we see in high school, like the wing T, triple option, whatever. I don't know that anymore, but just comparatively, what makes it, I guess, more difficult or at least unique in trying to communicate and pass down information in that type of rapid, quick snap, a million offense?
So when you got an offense moving fast like that, you're gonna have a lot of real simple, like one-word calls up front. You can't have long, intricate stuff like that because you want to move as fast as humanly possible in that situation. The big thing for offensive linemen is, and it kind of falls on the coaching staff as well, you have to practice like that. You can't just run regular practice and then try to be a no huddle running 80 plays a game. You can't do it. You have to practice the no huddle. You have to run your practices high tempo. You can't, you got to run the no huddle because it's going to get your offensive linemen in that shape that they need to be in order to sustain a full game like that. So that's the main thing, is the conditioning, and then easy calls up front.
How much of that falls on the line itself? And look, Pierce Quick is the front side guy for Paul Tyson, right tackle, been that way for years. How much is that on Quick and the O-line versus Paul Tyson or audibling, whatever, calling the plays out? How much is that on him? Is it 50-50? Is the line kind of their own entity in these offenses?
Yeah, so most of the time in my experience coaching in the no huddle, So you're going to have one guy that's signaling to your skill players, your quarterbacks, your receivers, tight ends, stuff like that. So they're getting the signal for whatever pass routes or whatever they're going to run. But then you have another signaler that's signaling to let them know whether it's going to be pass protection or whether it's going to be run blocking and stuff like that. So usually an offensive line has its own signaler, and they're paying attention to their signaler, not to what's on the skill guys.
Yeah, that's and obviously college football fans listening, that's where you get into all the fun hand signals or signs that you see.
You
You
get
see
the
like
signs.
yeah, like the Lee Corso head, or the Jordan Brand logo. Shout out to North Carolina there. You get all the fun
Don't
stuff.
sell your shoes.
Man, if we would have had those shoes,
You can't.
those things would have been
blame those
sold.
kids.
Those things would have been sold. Like, oh, we got them on a Wednesday. Cool. Like, I'm gonna make this short drive to a bigger city, and I'm gonna unload these things ASAP.
You can't blame those kids.
Yeah.
They have a exclusive pair of Jordans that is a hot commodity in the sneaker. You can't blame those kids.
Yeah,
they're pulling $2,500 for a pair of shoes. Like you know,
in college that's like $1 million. That's
you
think
can last
that's
off
enough
semester.
money forever? It's
you could live a whole semester on that. I know I could have, but that's when I heard that I was like, you're gonna blame these kids for selling some shoes? Like
it's tough.
But it's tough. So now, but you saw where all the Jordan schools are now like pooping down their leg because they investigate and make sure none of their kids have sold shoes. When I've seen, I'm a sneaker guy. I know I'm big into sneakers, and I've seen PEs from Jordan PEs from Michigan. I've seen Jordan PEs from Carolina, Marquette. I've seen them from all these schools online being
player
sold.
Exclusives, by the way. Those are PEs.
Player exclusive, if you don't know what a PE is. I've seen them all on eBay. So I feel like this is probably a big deal, maybe, because, these shoes are sought after like that. Like it's a big deal, like to get a pair of exclusive shoes. Not to mention the Oregon shoes. Like the Oregon shoes are completely different.
It's like the Holy Grail right there.
Yeah, those are. If I could get my hands on one, I would have already done it. But they're stupid expensive.
Right on cue. Phil Knight was at Oregon football practice on Tuesday. So yeah,
shocking.
How about that?
He probably gave him another pair of shoes.
These guys, he's like breaking like Mario Cristobal breaks it down. All right, go Ducks or whatever they say. Fly high. I don't know. And then
don't sell your shoes.
Phil Knight comes in. Hey guys, Phil Knight. And everyone's like, yeah, free shoes. And he's like, yeah, I'm here to talk about the shoes because we need to make sure that we're keeping those in the dorm room. We're keeping those in the locker room. Like Phil, they flew Phil in himself to set it straight with the kids. That's funny. But it's funny. I think the day before the Jordan Brand thing happened, I saw a video of one of these summer basketball leagues. There seems like to be a million different leagues with pro and amateur, whatever. And Isaiah Thomas, the younger one, not the retired great, good, not great. He walks into the gym, somebody's videoing him, and he's got the North Carolina player exclusive. So like
the Drew League, son.
Yeah, like that's, you want to know how, even if I'm not, Kevin definitely is. If you want to know how much of a commodity these things are, NBA players are trying to get these things that only a certain small group of collegiate players receive. That is all you need to know.
They wear them in games. PJ Tucker is your head king of basketball. The day after the Jordan Brand thing broke, he takes a picture with his feet up on his coffee table in the Jordan 3s that the players were accused of.
Right.
With a caption of "nothing to see here," something like that. Like these pro players, and they'll pay. That's why you can't blame these kids. Like these pro athletes will pay that money for these shoes, and they wear them in games because it's a big. Everybody tries to wear the coolest sneakers on court. Like there's multiple like media outlets that are dedicated to watching what these basketball players are wearing on the court.
Yeah, I think an Indianapolis area code will be very, very soon, as well as
Probably.
Isaiah, and as well as I mean, now it's all so public that you can just look on Twitter and find, oh, here's a pair of North Carolina PEs, here's a pair of Oregon and Michigan, and you can almost find it without being super smart. So,
I'm
yeah,
just waiting.
that's
I'm waiting on the Florida ones to happen because those kids sold some stuff.
Dan Mullen was probably selling his like, hey man, I got I got so many custom ones. Here you go. So yeah, and yeah, how is that? It's just the NCAA, man. Everybody's able to transfer, but don't sell your shoes. Don't sell your shoes. You can play immediately at another school across the country, but don't sell those.
After leaving your former program.
Yeah, don't sell those shoes. Okay. All right. We'll leave the shoe conversation there. For all your shoe inquiries, please contact Producer Kev at Producer Kev on Twitter. Is that your handle, Producer Kev?
Producer underscore Kev.
So there was a guy, Kev.
Yes, there was. I was
mean,
mad. I was legitimately
what are
mad
the
about
odds?
that. I know.
I mean, heck, that's Twitter, man. It's probably a robot. It's probably like a robot.
No, it had a picture of a normal looking white guy.
Okay. Shout out to the normal looking white guys out there. All right, so let's move on. We've talked plenty about these Hewitt guys. I guess DeZalen Worsham we haven't as much, so hit on him. Get on to the real football team, or the current Alabama football team. Just real quick, DeZalen Worsham getting bigger, which is good. That's one of the areas. He was always this kind of skinny wide receiver. He's getting up closer to 180 pounds, which is good for him. 6'1". His hair's getting bigger too. We'll put a good hair picture on as I say that. And he's become more polished, and that's good because initially known as the vertical threat. Paul Tyson had all of these great underneath targets last year. Logan Pitts was this H-back slot receiver who ended up at Tennessee Chattanooga. He's actually going to be coached by a teammate at Chattanooga. Shout out to Greg Harbaugh.
Shout out Harbaugh.
That's a funny connection. And then he had Elliot McElwain underneath, who was the running back, but Hewitt throws to the running back as much as any school I've seen at the high school level. So he's underneath targets. Part of the reason why his completion percentage was high, his interceptions were low. But when he wanted to go downfield, it was to number 4. It was to DeZalen Worsham. Now he's got 2 guys who can do that with Auburn, but conversely, I think as Worsham's getting older, he's like, hey, I can't blow the top off of every defense. He's not a 4-3, 4-4 guy. I know this is a Bama show, and he's ranked very high, a little too high. But he's not a 4-3, 4-4 guy, and he's 6'1", 170. So if he's not blazing by dudes right now on a consistent basis, he's got to become better at the little things. He's got to become a better route. Hands more, catch the football away from his body, come out of those breaks really hard at the top of the route. And he's doing those things already, and that's what you want to see. I've talked to Paul Tyson about those 2 receivers. I've talked to each receiver about the other. Talked to Malachi Moore about those 2 receivers, and a consistent theme, not only from what we see, but coming from guys who literally see and deal with these guys more than anyone else. So Worsham is polishing up. I think he's going to be a rock steady type of wide receiver at the next level, a side type, not necessarily a Calvin Ridley, blow the top off of the defense, but a more consistent possession receiver who has the ability to occasionally blow the top off of a defense. Think of more of a type of wide receiver, I think, physically once he arrives in Tuscaloosa. Again, class of 2020, still 2 years of high school ball to play there, even though he's been on the scene for a very long time with a ton of offers and all of that. So, Bama High School, and we're going to talk a lot more about these guys, I'm sure, in the weeks, months, and probably years to come. So keep it locked on 24/7. Yellowhammer 24/7 for all your in-state news there. All right, Kev, let's go where we don't ever want to go. Let's go to the quarterbacks. Let's talk
Say it ain't
spring
so.
ball. Or not spring ball. Jeez, fall camp. Look,
Scrimmage.
scrimmage is in the books. Closed scrimmage. Closed scrimmage. But you didn't have to travel very far to get in good information, whether it was former players, longtime sources, reading too much into what Nick Saban had. You got some kind of information out of the scrimmage, and it's pretty unanimous when it comes to that quarterback position. Jalen Hurts versus Tua on this day, about as opposite as can be. Pretty much a reflection of the national championship game in terms of Tua was great, touchdowns, big throws, consistent. Jalen was not. Missed throws, incompletions, and interceptions. And that's where you start to say, anyone, even on the Jalen side of this conversation could live with Tua was a better thrower, more successful, more touchdowns, whatever. But when the mistakes and the turnovers pop up, this is where he can lose ground about as fast as anything else in this race. Because that, I think, was, and it still is, because the race isn't over. Nick Saban said that nothing that is going into his decision or solidifying a decision, he said. Something like that. But when Jalen Hurts is turning the football over, that is like one of his best assets. Game manager, ball handler, possession, and when you turn the football over, you lose all of those things. All of those things go out the window. 4 strengths immediately become a weakness, at least for the short term. And that's where you start to say, okay, however close it was, perhaps it's not as close. And Tua really created as much separation on Saturday as he has with that throw to Devontae Smith. At least perceptionally, it seems like the gap is as wide right now as it's ever been. Remember, before this point, a lot of the Jalen Hurts thoughts came from his experience, and the fact that in spring ball he got the lion's share of everything because Tua was hurt. Tua had the hand injury, so there was an element of Tua needing to catch up, etc. But I think all of that's out the window, and I think as big as it was perceptionally during the national championship game, after the national championship game, with the Heisman voters, with all the people who just went straight to the moon on the two. That is where it feels right now. Saban doesn't say it's over. A lot of sources to us do not say it is over, but they do say it's so. By all indication, Tua Tagovailoa has created as much separation now as he ever has, and I think that's not good news for Jalen Hurts. And you gotta wonder. I mean, the last 2 Saturdays for Jalen Hurts, he had a kind of quote storm, if you want to call it that. If I want to call it that, I just did. He had that where he caught a lot of people by surprise. Whether you agree with him, disagree with him, unfairly most of the time, or you support him, those comments caught people by surprise, regardless of how you feel about it. I don't think people went into that media day saying, hey, Jalen's going to speak and he's going to, shuffle the deck, ruffle some feathers, call out Nick Saban. All of those things he did to some degree 2 Saturdays ago. And then last Saturday, the scrimmage we're talking about, where we don't have the official stats or video evidence of every single play, but when it's coming from 5, 6, 7, 8 sources and it's all pretty much the same deal, you can infer it as the truth. So that's where we're at in the quarterback situation at Alabama, and it just makes you wonder. I got a text this morning from somebody in the industry, and there was no context, there was no pretext, it was one text, and it says, when does Jalen transfer? And I was just like, man, we're at with this thing. So the news travels fast. The takes have been hard, hot, and heavy. following Saturday, and even as more days, we have more days to kind of sit on it and marinate with the information, it still feels kind of big and the gap wide. So I just think that's where it is right now. It is, it's August 15th, so there's still 2.5 weeks until game one down in Orlando against Louisville. The more it goes on, and if this separation remains, there's the Jalen argument is certainly decreasing. It's certainly decreasing. But if you trust Nick Saban, which I assume all Bama fans do, is that 100? Or are there some contrarians who are willing to say they do not trust him, making it 99% or something? If you trust in his word, then he is saying it's not over. So for the Jalen camp, and some people think I'm president of that camp. As your president, I say it's not over, but it's pretty much over. Kev, you have any thoughts on this? I know you have different sources. You're on different source material than I. It's not over.
Yeah,
but
I wouldn't say nobody has said it's over, but the thing that I kept reading was that, like you said, Tua has created a gap, and that the quarterback competition is becoming more clear. I think, and it's obviously it's going to be an unofficial, but the unofficial stats that I saw and that I've read from multiple sources is 3 touchdowns, where Jalen threw 3 interceptions.
Who would have predicted that?
Yeah, Jalen's been such a consistent, not turning the ball over game manager. So kind of surprising to hear that he threw 3 picks.
Yeah.
Maybe
he's overcompensating. Like, hey, Tua's the guy.
Yeah.
I gotta do something extra.
That's it could very well be the decision. A guy he's so into it that he's trying so hard to win this job that maybe he's trying to do too much, and doing too much is putting him in a bad situation. He throws 3 picks because he's trying to fit a ball somewhere but he's still trying because he's got this cat on the other side slinging 3 touchdowns. Like, it's a tough thing, and for be like, oh, when does Jalen transfer and all this? Like,
that's all the text said. I was like, damn.
Jalen's not going to transfer. He's 15 credits away from graduation. There's no reason to transfer. He's 15 credits away from graduation, and he can graduate and still have 2 years of eligibility left.
Yeah, we'll reevaluate that after the season.
Yeah, exactly. So the when does he transfer? I don't think he transfers. What he does in typical Jalen fashion, he stays. He supports Tua, which he's been vocal in his support of Tua, and Tua's been vocal in his support of Jalen. So I think the two. I think Jalen sticks around and helps Tua on and off the field.
Yeah, and it feels like at some point they're going to need both, right? Like, I feel like at some point someone's going to get the wind knocked out. This story feels like they're going to need each other both publicly and privately. Yeah. Like at some point, like, hey, man, I need you to pick me up. Maybe,
I'm having a bad day. I need you right now.
Maybe Bama's rolling, all you game comes, and boom, somebody's unblocked. And Tua's out for the whole game. Maybe Jalen has to come in and play that whole game and win that whole game. And maybe he can. Maybe then Bama fans him. I mean, it's been so harsh for Jalen publicly.
Yeah,
and
we're talking about
this dude like he's a scrub, man. Yeah.
A 19-year-old kid. Like, let's not be so.
Well, he just turned 20 the other day. So.
Oh, 20. Yeah, he did have a birthday. Love on the timeline for his birthday, so that was good to see. But yeah, let's remember he's a 20-year-old kid. Let's not be so harsh.
Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But certainly Tua did his thing by every indication, and hopefully, if Nick would have just said, "Hey, Tua's the guy," boom, done. What happens then? Is there anything in Nick that says, if I know that, I still can't say that?
Yeah, I think
Or
so.
is he too old and he don't care?
Nah, I don't get it even if he
I
knew
agree.
it 100%.
Yeah, Nick Saban's politicking out here.
Yep.
He's got to. I think he's got to.
Got to.
Yeah. Okay, enough of the quarterbacks. Let's move on. Let's go.
Well, hold on, one more. But from the script, a little more serious than the quarterback battle is Najee on a
Oh, you're killing me today.
foot scooter.
Yeah.
There's everything I've read is they're calling it a foot injury. Initially, someone came out and said he had torn his ACL, blah blah blah. But that was quickly discredited. Everything I've seen is he's dealing with a foot injury. Don't know how serious. He didn't practice today, or I mean yesterday. He didn't practice on Tuesday. So don't know how serious it is, but he was seen on a leg scooter. So
I saw a funny response to that report. It was a Bama fan, of course. It said, "Well, thankfully, Bama doesn't have a game until November." So we've talked about the crappy Bama schedule for quite some time, but it's kind of it factors into everything. I think even the quarterback situation. I mean,
Well, I've also seen the meme that says Bama's. It gives Bama a schedule, and then it says Bama can play 3 quarterbacks, and none of them lose their eligibility and still go 12-0. It has the games, it has the obvious games where Mac's starting, and then it has the more important games where Jalen's starting, and then it has the real big games, Tua starting, and it says they can still go 12-0 in eligibility. And then obviously the comment section is, well, then who starts the playoffs? So they run Wildcat.
If somebody's thinking they're running all those quarterbacks out there enough to make that meme, then they're not thinking about the logical situation of the postseason. Not only the play SEC championship game, because if you're undefeated, you're in that game, obviously. So who's playing that game?
Running Wildcat, I guess.
Rolling the walk on out there. Hey man, go win this SEC title.
Go win this SEC title
go
game.
Beat Georgia. Just beat you at all costs. Go beat them.
Yeah.
And any chance anybody but Georgia is in Atlanta for that SEC title game?
Probably not.
What a terrible division.
It's awful.
I know. Look, I know this is it's Bama podcast, whatever. I never understood that. Look, that division's terrible. Florida, South Carolina. Anybody have a shot at Georgia?
I guess if I would have to give it to somebody, I guess I'm Carolina the edge. Just because of what they brought back. Florida, God only knows what's going to happen in Gainesville. They think Dan Mullen's the savior, and I still don't think they have a quarterback. They think Felipe Frank's a good quarterback, and then now everybody's talking about Emory Jones as their savior, and I've seen both of them in person, and neither one of them were impressive. So is ready. I don't think they're there. They got Jordan Brand, big deal. And then South Carolina.
Jake Bentley, baby.
Jake Bentley. And then whatever random receiver that has a big year.
Random undersized receiver who plays bigger than he is and is tough and also runs the ball and end arounds and things like that, because they always have one of those, right?
They always have one,
Yep.
And then they'll have a stud middle linebacker
who's also undersized.
Yeah. And so that's going to be South Carolina's team in a nutshell. But I think they give Georgia the best.
Yeah, I think that game's really early too, so that could be beneficial.
Yeah. So
we'll see.
Must champ.
Anyway, the East, good God, the East it's bad. It's really bad. I saw there was when I was listening to Jocks Radio, the local station there, and they were talking about the toughest divisions in college football.
Yeah, can we just like talk about that for a second? Because
that's a big debate, man. That might take up the rest of the pod.
Well, just quickly, we talk about the SEC East being bad and being really bad, and then
you're going to the bottom of the conversation.
I'm going to the bottom. I like going to the bottom of the conversation way better than I like going to the top.
I'm here for that.
So, yeah, we just talked about the SEC East being the bad, but can we talk about the big? Is it the Big Ten East? I think
it's the Big Ten. I just call it the Big Ten, not the Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State division.
Yeah, so
that's
I mean,
what it's called to me.
Obviously
they'll change the names again to the the indoor birds and the outdoor birds, but
yeah, exactly. So you have the SEC East and the SEC West, which is a big difference in talent. But then you have the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is probably the worst in the country when it comes to the separation of their teams. Because
no balance.
Because you have Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State in the same bracket. And then in those four, the rest of their side of the division is Maryland, Rutgers, and Indiana. Awful.
Hey, Indiana's going to be pretty good this year, maybe.
Yeah, but you have Rutgers.
Yeah, especially, and this is even before. This is just normal Maryland. This is pre-scandal.
This is pre-scandal. DJ Durkin.
It's going to be worse. Maryland's going to be worse than we all thought.
So then you got that's the Big Ten East. So the big one. Then you go to the Big Ten West. And you have Minnesota, Iowa, Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, Northwestern, and Nebraska.
Any of those was like, yes, give me that job. I have to beat one or two teams, and I'm in the title game, baby. Let's go.
Scott Frost wins a national championship at UCF and rides out because he's like, oh, Nebraska's my home. That's my job. And I'm in the Big Ten West, like, I got to beat Purdue and Wisconsin, and I'm good. Or no, I got to beat Iowa, and I'm in there. Like,
in there.
I think
they're ready to lose to Ohio State or Michigan State.
Or one of them. So, I like to go to the bottom of the barrel. But, yeah, that's definitely the biggest division in talent that is in the country, in my opinion, because – at least the SEC East has.
I mean, you have a national title contender in the SEC East, so that makes it. That makes it
better.
It brings it up. Yeah, it brings it up a little bit. But that Big Ten West. Sorry, Wisconsin fans. I don't think there's a national title contender there.
Because then you go to the Pac-12, and they did a pretty good job separating their divisions. I mean, they put Oregon and SC on opposite sides. I mean.
Yeah,
they did good there.
Those are contenders for sure. For sure. You can't outstand. If Washington beats Auburn week 1, heck, if Washington beats Auburn week 1, who can't they beat on their schedule?
Exactly.
Right. So that group's got contenders on each side. Big 12 doesn't even count, I don't think.
Because they don't have they don't count. They don't have divisions like
I think they got a title game now. I think they just
do they? Oh, but it's
the
just
first year.
They're taking the top two teams.
Because they're the Big 12.
It's not a division thing.
Yeah.
So now you're giving Kansas no chance. Like
poor Kansas.
So the bottom of the barrels is always fun to talk about, but let's talk about our poll.
Yeah. ACC Coastal real quick was really bad before the last few years of Miami coming back and resurging, Virginia Tech.
Is Miami back though?
Well, it's starting to come back and resurge. They're on the way. Like they hit navigation and they began that step, but they still have miles and miles to go on this journey.
Because that division's pretty weak too.
It is. But you have a couple of programs, and then you have That division is comprised of all teams that typically aren't very good, but man, every few years, all those teams
They
are
have a
amazing.
year. They have
Georgia
a year.
Tech, Pitt,
Pitt, Virginia, even Virginia Tech,
yeah.
Duke,
Every few
Carolina
every
had
few
that
years, they're
year.
amazing and have 10 NFL guys, and then the next three or four, they struggle to make a bowl
Awful.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that's a funny division there. The other one is really good way. So yeah, it's just funny how in the ACC, SEC, Big Ten, just how one sided those divisions are. And nobody talks about that. I feel like I mean the SEC West is just stupid. And the Big Ten, what is it East with
The
Ohio
Big
State
Ten,
and those guys?
the Big Ten East.
I mean that's ridiculous. I mean maybe hey Jim Harbaugh shouldn't get all that shade for finishing third every year, right? Or maybe he
He's
should.
doing a solid job.
Yeah, solid's not good enough.
Not for
Not in
Michigan
these parts.
fans.
Yeah.
Not when you lose to Ohio State every year.
Okay, let's get to our poll, please.
Our poll. Let's move on. We
All
done.
right, so at the end, around this time of the pod on Monday, we asked about the O-line and about recruiting because spots are running low, and a lot of our listeners have asked us about certain spots and things like that. So we cool because we like to do that. One O-line spot left for Bama. Who are you taking? 5-star Evan Neal, 5-star Clay Webb. When we kind of created this question on accident, just talking about answering another question last show, but we predicted that Webb would win it, but I didn't think Webb would win it by this much. Webb won the poll 2% to 38% for Evan Neal. But as always, our listeners had some pretty cool responses as to why. You know, they really kind of qualified. For instance, Bill Big D tweets out, would rather have a 5-star offensive tackle, and he was better at the opening. Pretty straightforward. I agree most to that explanation. However,
Clay Webb couldn't wear pads at the opening. Man.
That's true too. I know you're going to stick up for him. But then we get other responses that are more qualified. Like Bam Burnett says, I'd say if Webb wasn't playing center. Interesting there, because we're all assuming here that we're talking about Clay Webb at center. But apparently there's chatter that Clay Webb may aspire to play center. I haven't heard that. He hasn't told me that over the last 2.5 years of covering him. But maybe
somebody got word on the street.
Somebody's pushing that. So maybe it's Georgia or Auburn trying to get him. But somebody is pushing, and I think that's pretty interesting. So it's always good answers there. And then Todd Robertson had a really good response because we gave 3 options: Clay Webb, Evan Neal, or other. You could see it right here on our fancy simulcast. 0% for other. So nobody said someone else. But Todd Robertson played the game. He said, I have 2 answers. If we get Darnell Wright, then Clay Webb and Evan Neal. So basically, Todd Robertson agrees with Brent Key, Nick Saban, and the rest of Bama Nation. Bama needs a tackle. They need a tackle. They need a tackle in this class, and I think most people are fine with Darnell Wright and recognize that as sort of a priority. But if they get one, then you bring in Clay Webb as kind of the compliment there. Obviously, that's all hypothetical, but just some good answers there. Rafael Monroy said Webb. He'd be anchor in the center, or at center, like I said, at Bama, with great Bama centers of the past. Certainly, think of Ryan Kelly, Bradley Bozeman, guys like that, Barrett Jones, most recently, over the last few years. That would make some sense there. And he's an in-state guy, too, so I wonder how much of that 62% has to do with Clay being a in-state kid. Not a hometown kid, but an in-state kid there nonetheless. So just interesting. I lean Neal when we constructed the poll, just because he seems once in a lifetime, this kid. But so does Clay Webb, doesn't he? I mean, they're a guy that consistent at center and guard, like Clay Webb. So that's a tough one. It's a tough one. How much does in-state matter there, Kev? I mean, this is Bama, so to me, it's like you get the best. Period. Who cares where they're from? But there's a lot of people that will know if it's fairly close, you take the in-state guy.
Yeah, I figured it was gonna weigh into the answers with Clay being an in-state guy. Like Alabama, Alabama fans like to see their Alabama kids go to Alabama. They don't want their kids to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I feel like that probably weighed into it, but I chose Neil.
Oh, so you were with me. See, I thought you were leading Clay.
Nah, I chose Neil.
Oh.
After watching him at the opening, like, you got to get that kid on board.
Yeah, it's pretty much a 5-star everywhere now. Although his great performance was not seen by one outlet, but he's a 5-star there anyway. So thanks for watching our videos, competitors. Anyway, Kev got some questions via the email. Jump in there. Jared W. chiming in. And again, if you'd like to do so, cabcpod@gmail.com. Jared says, "Hey, John, this one's for Producer Kev." For saying hello, Jared, and I'll pass it on to Kev. Jared says, "How early in the game are you able to tell that the guy you're blocking has no chance against you? Also, what percentage of linemen throughout his football career were thinking, damn, I'm in for a long night?" I love this question. I couldn't love it much more, actually. I think that's what CABC is all about right there, baby. So, Kev, the floor is yours. What's the percentage of linemen who felt that way about John Allen, and when do you know? I mean, when do you really know that you're in for a long night, or the guy you're going against is in for a long night in the trenches, which I cannot attest to, trying to piss you guys off in practice and trying to kind of blindside you when I was near the line of scrimmage.
Bush League. No, yeah, let's see. For Jonathan Allen, probably 100% of the offensive linemen that he went against. Just because of his sheer power and his skill set at that position, I would probably say there probably wasn't an offensive lineman in the country that said, "Hey, I get to block Allen all game." There's probably one or two that kind of wanted to rise to the challenge. The other part of your question, talking about how do I know when someone's in for a long night? I know I'm in for a long night. Luckily, I didn't have too many long nights in my career, thankfully. But for me, it was a lot about watching film and making a mental game plan for myself. I wanted to know what moves the kid had, first off. I wanted to know when he used those moves, and then I wanted to know the basic essentials, like how big, what size, how high, tall, how much weight. So that was my mental preparation, and I watched them, and I broke down every opponent that I played, and I had a notebook from each year and I broke down every nose tackle because we played a lot of teams that ran the 3-4. So I had a nose most games, and that was, that's what I did. I broke them down. I learned the moves. I learned what I needed to know. So then when I stepped out onto the field, I already knew what was coming. If it was first down and his go-to move on first down is push-pull, I knew it was coming. If it was rip, I knew it was coming. So I prepared myself mentally so that I could dominate on Saturdays. and it helped so much being in that film room. And I had no idea what a film room was till I got to college because we didn't watch film in high school really. But being a film rat helped me become a dominant player on the field. So I would say probably Thursday, I knew that the kid was in for a long day. But as far as actual like getting onto the field and making it happen, in my mind he was already done Thursday. But physically, you get that good first series in, and you know that it's going to be downhill from there for him. Just because either the moves weren't as good as you might have thought, or he's not as good as he looked on film. That happens a lot of times. Kids look really good on film. You get out there, not really good. So I like to mentally prepare myself. Thursday was my that I thought that I had a good idea of he was in for a long day. And then after the first series, physically, I knew by that time. So yeah, that was my
poor John Allen opponents there.
It's really bad. I wouldn't have wanted to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say that would have been a tough one for you. All right, so another email jumping in, Dylan Britt, who has emailed us before. Thanks for jumping back in. He says, "Hey John, hope all is well. I'm glad to see you on YouTube now. I saw that you had a poll out on who Bama fans would want Bama to beat in the national championship. My vote to Ohio State 2 for now. Give me a couple years and it will probably be UGA. In my opinion, OSU has the overall better talent and team this year, so I would want Bama to send a message to OSU and the Big Ten. GA is coming on strong with the talent. Speaking of OSU, and here's the actual question, I've got one last quarterback question and I'll leave it alone. Haha. You might see this differently, but I view Braxton Miller from Ohio State and Jalen Hurts in the same way. Braxton, great for Ohio State for a long time, and had a lot of wins under his belt, but when OSU found a player better suited as a quarterback, he changed positions to wide receiver. Do you think Jalen could end up doing the same thing Braxton? Thanks, and God bless. That is one I haven't heard, Dylan, so congratulations on that one. We've heard about Jalen. We've heard people asking, "Hey, can Jalen be a guy?" And obviously, we don't know that answer. He's never done it. I think the difference is athletically, I would put Braxton Miller ahead of Jalen Hurts. So I think I see thought just in terms of, hey, can Jalen physically do this? Yeah, he probably could, but this is the thing. When you're switching positions at a school like that, who are you replacing at Alabama? Who are you taking off the field at wide receiver? Agrees to it, which, by the way, I don't think he would ever agree to this. Not at Alabama, anyway. But which receiver are you taking off the field? Are you taking Jerry Jeudy off the field? Are you taking Devontae Smith off the field? Are you taking Henry Ruggs off? If he's a receiver? And if he's a running back, you have even less of an argument for me. Who are you taking off the field for him? That's, I think, where you talk about if it's just about getting on the field, my argument would be that Jalen Hurts' best bet after the scrimmage is still quarterback. It's the path of least resistance. One guy he's got to beat out. Now, it's a pretty good one guy, but it's one guy. At receiver and all these other positions, I just don't. Where is he going to play? But I do like the comp. I do think in terms of maturity, coming of age, all of that, they're similar. But I also think, remember, it was a unique circumstance with Braxton Miller. He got in, and they won a national championship with two other quarterbacks. So it was a little bit different in terms of why he wasn't there. And he also wasn't there, I believe, for the majority of that year. So it wasn't a half type of deal like it was for Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. So the circumstances were a little bit different, but hey, he could have left, right? He could have transferred, or he could have gone to the NFL, and he probably still would have gotten drafted. I think the circumstances of coming back and playing, I think that was his wake-up call, being out for a year. I think in his mind he was probably already thinking, I'm going to wide receiver, I'm playing something else during that year of adjusting because he was injured. I don't think Jalen Hurts has had him to even begin working on a skill set that will get him on the field at an Alabama at that type of position. But maybe he redshirts and makes that call, creates the time. I don't think it'll happen, but maybe he does it. Good question in there. Definitely a new perspective in terms of the precedent and the player. So I like it. I'm a big fan of outside the box, for sure. Carl Lenzner next with some comments and a question here. He says, good afternoon, John. I don't know if you were joking about Lane Kiffin being the head coach at LSU next year, but if Lane could not succeed at USC, then he won't succeed in Baton Rouge because of Nick Saban. The LSU job is much, much harder than the USC job. Any coach that knows what he is doing should succeed at USC. It should be the Alabama of the West Coast. LSU fans are much more demanding. USC fans Your thoughts? I have a lot of thoughts on that, Carl. I think
there's so many thoughts.
Why? I feel like I'm the only one who thinks the LSU job is the best job in the country.
LSU is an amazing job, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, number one NFL talent producing state per capita, no in-state rival. Texas is literally around the corner from there, and East Texas is always talented, where LSU has always pulled from. You are in a position where your division will get you to the playoff. There's not a lot of we just talked about the crappy divisions. Winning the SEC West will get you to the playoff more times than not. Winning some of these crappy divisions won't get you anything. All it'll get you is an ass whooping at some NFL stadium and a trip to the Capital One Bowl. So, USC has obviously a ton of potential. It's a blue blood, but so is LSU. Let's remember, LSU's won a natty more recently than US. So the whole USC thing has always sort of surpassed me, and I think, saying that any coach that should succeed at USC or should be able to succeed at LSU, two different ball games, two different everything. I think how could a coach not succeed at LSU? Right? It's
right. It's set up for success.
Yeah.
All you gotta do is find yourself a quarterback.
It seems like that's all they've had to do, period. And they just haven't been able to do it. And now poor Coach O loses a quarterback. We're gonna play some sound here. Been waiting for this all day. So Lowell Narcisse, commit by the way, has decided to transfer away from LSU. And this was Coach O talking about Lowell Narcisse just a little while ago produced here by Jacques Doucette over there in Baton Rouge.
Lowell Narcisse is probably the most talented linebacker. Most talented. He looks like a linebacker. Quarterback that we have. He's a bull. He can run the football. He's hard moving out. Lowell had 2 ACLs. Didn't play for 2 years. So he's just coming back next year. In the spring, he was full speed, looking good, has a rocket for an arm, still needs to develop a little bit. Good to see him.
So Ed Orgeron was interested to see that, but he didn't get to see that because Lowell is now transferring 12 days later, and that's unfortunate. But if he is gone, and look at the schedule. You don't have to be the most comprehensive, handicapper in the history of college football. You open with Miami. You got Georgia in the cross. You got Bama, which you have every year, right? Auburn, which is a title contender. Those four games, you got to win one of those. Which one are they going to win? And that's assuming LSU takes care of the Mississippi schools. Arkansas, and Texas A&M during their rivalry game, the last game of the year, with a whole year of Jimbo Fisher now, under everybody's belt in that A&M program. Again, it's going to be very hard. If that number is 9, I'll get to 9. I don't know, but if our guy Ed Orgeron retires, he can get on a podcast and probably make as much money as he's making now, because I would subscribe to that podcast. Pod.
Absolutely.
And that's just it. And he just runs local ads about Hummers and,
If you haven't seen that video, please look it up. Just Ed Orgeron, Hummers.
First guest is Brett Schaefer. I mean, I would listen to that pod. I'll parlay my pod. I would take CABC down one day a week, and that middle day will just be Coach O Wednesday on CABC. And we will, I don't know what we'll talk about, probably life, and it will be great. So, Coach O, come holla at us at CABC, because you've got a future in this multimedia thing industry. But anyway.
Life lessons with Coach O.
Oh, my gosh. Just sign me up immediately. But yeah, Carl, I just think LSU is a much better job than a lot of people are giving it credit for. Talent-wise, resource-wise, conference-wise, everything is well-positioned. There's a lot of hard conferences out there. But there's very few that get you a ticket right in. I think there's 2. Really, I think this division in the SEC West, maybe the ACC Atlantic with Clemson, Florida State, Louisville. At least the last few years, that has gotten you in. And maybe the Big Ten, the division with Ohio State. That's it. Out of the, 10 divisions, 3 get you a ticket for free. USC does not get you a ticket if you push through. So, face value, I'm taking the LSU job over USC. Maybe I'm an SEC homer and I don't even know it. But give me the LSU job with resources, those fans, that atmosphere, New Orleans right down the road, the number 1 NFL talent state per capita. Give me all of that over USC, where you have to compete with a school who, by the way, just got Chip Kelly and is not going to go away anytime soon. Washington is on the upward trajectory. Oregon is on the upward trajectory. The Pac-12 is always kind of freaky anyway. There's always kind of some weirdness brewing there. Stanford every year looks unbeatable. Give me, and people care more in the South. Give me those people who care more. You even said it, Carl. You said the LSU fans demand more. Exactly why you should be at LSU over USC. Wouldn't you want the challenge? You want the demand. You want that. And not to mention, when Lane Kiffin coached at USC several years ago, I think everybody understands that he's learned a lot since then, both professionally and perhaps most important, personally. He's talked about that. He's admitted that. He's gone through a divorce. He's gone through some growth, multiple stops. He's been the head man at FAU with no off-the-field issues as far as we know. Benefit of the doubt. This is America. Second chance you, baby. This is what we do in this country. So I just think at this stage of Lane Kiffin, much more suited for LSU. He's like a gambling dude, like not literally, but he seems like a gamble worth taking. Whatever. Terrible pun, but it's fine. So anyway, I take LSU over USC. But how many wins for Ed Orgeron? I don't know. Comes on and says, you speculated how many wins Ed Orgeron needs to keep his job. I don't know the exact number, but I do know this. Whatever the number is, one of those wins has to be over Alabama or it won't matter. Nah. If they go 11-1 and lose to Alabama, Coach O is about to get an extension. Like that would be great at LSU. So the number I think is 9, and I think it's going to be hard to get to, but you don't Alabama to get to 9, and certainly don't got to beat them to get to 11. And I think that would more than satisfy those crazy fans and all of that pressure. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see if they do open that gig back up. Is in the mix, and if it's Lane Kiffin, I deserve a couple dollars for it. I don't know. Deserve something out of that one. Anyway, Carl, still rolling on here. He says it would be a big mistake for Alabama to hire a first-time coach when Nick retires. No first-time head coach can do the Alabama job. It would not be fair to Alabama or the person who got the job. Your thoughts? Thanks for letting me get it off my chest. I like it, Carl. Come back with it. Yeah, we didn't suggest Tosh Lupoy, which is, I assume, what you're referring to. That was a question that we liked. It was outside the box. It was something that we hadn't really thought about. But, hey, you look next door in Georgia. Working out pretty good for those guys with that first time coach, who was a defensive coordinator, who was groomed by Nick Saban, who would have all the same qualifications Tosh Lupoy would have if he theoretically took over at Alabama one day. Obviously, it's gone the other way with others. Jim McElwain had a decent run at Colorado State, not so great at Florida. A lot of Nick Saban's assistants who became first-time head coaches went one way or the other, but a lot of them have become fairly successful. Maybe not national title worthy out of Jimbo Fisher, but and Kirby Smart, really. I think we can call him national title worthy, even though he's not a national title winner. It's worked out pretty good for a lot of these guys. And a question asker from Monday wasn't referring to Tosh Lupoy like in 2019. I think he was referring to Tosh Lupoy, 2026, 2027, down the road, where he's really had that mirror journey of a Kirby Smart. I don't know. I think it's possible. He wouldn't be my pick right now. I think after beating Alabama in Tampa a couple of years ago for that national championship, Dabo Swinney vaulted himself alone in that who will follow Nick conversation. But we don't know when that's going to happen, and we don't know who's going to be available when that happens. What if Dabo goes in the tank the next 5 years, and then Nick hangs it up? Is he still atop the list? Probably not. So we'll see. I hadn't thought of Tosh. I like that outside-the-box question. I wouldn't say it's impossible because it's worked with other guys, including the guy who's going to be your main rival in the next 10 years, Kirby, the University of Georgia. So that precedent had worked for them. Why couldn't it work for Alabama? And then finally, Raphael Monroy going to take us home today on Crimson and Blue Chips. He says, hope all is well. Only about 7 spots in recruiting. Thinking 4 of those will be 5 stars. What's your take? Well, sure. Let's make 4 of them 5 stars. Let's say Trey Sanders, Evan Neal, and Daxton Hill round out the class. And 3 non-5 stars join them. I'm with you, Raphael. I think it's possible. Which 5 stars, I don't know. And remember, 5 stars change. 5 stars change. So, also kind of tough to know there. But I think Bama's got a good shot to end with a lot of 5 stars. If that's kind of where you're getting at, I see where you're going there. And then finally from Raphael, if Ben Davis wasn't a legacy, he would have transferred by now. Roll Tide Roll from Long Island, New York. Wow. Ben Davis, if he wasn't a legacy, would he? I'll say no. Ben, committed kid, dedicated kid, smart kid, moved around a ton at Alabama. I think he's going to fight it out. There have been legacies who have transferred out of Alabama. Shadarius Jennings transferred last year, younger brother of Anthony Jennings, a senior captain type player. I think the legacy, it means a lot to him. What his dad did at Alabama, still the all-time leading tackler at the university. That means a lot to Ben, but I don't think that's the only reason Ben would stay. I don't think that's fair to him, and I don't think that's fair to his dad. I think he's a fighter. I think he's willing to work it out. Look, he's moving all around the field. If he would have transferred, if that would have bugged him enough, he'd have been gone last year. because he was already moving inside linebacker, outside linebacker, jack linebacker, doing a lot of different things. So I would have already forced him out. And there's also stories of guys who have waited around and have really blossomed very late in their career. Even at the linebacker position, Reggie Ragland sat 2 years. Reuben Foster sat the better part of 2 years. C.J. Mosley had to sit a little bit. A lot of these guys have had to sit at that position, and at other positions, they've had to wait even longer, but they still found their light at the end of the tunnel. It sat 3+ years before seeing the field. Levi Wallace even longer than that as a former walk-on. So there are plenty of success stories for guys who, for one reason or another, had to wait their turn at Alabama. Now, what's clear is that turn is not very apparent. It's not very clear, like, hey, when this guy's gone, it's Ben Davis's job. We don't have that scenario in looking at Alabama just yet, but it can materialize weeks. It can materialize over the next few months, or perhaps even after this season. So you just never know. And look, if there's any school where starting or playing a lot as a reserve for 1 year can still get you drafted, it's Alabama. That goal and that hope is still technically out there for the taking for Ben Davis and literally everybody else on the roster. So that alone, I would imagine, when it gets tough, keeps guys on Alabama side of the fence there. But a good question, Raphael. Hadn't heard that one as well, and that is why we love our listeners pushing us outside the box Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays right here on YouTube, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the whole deal with us at Crimson and Blue Chips. But that'll do it for today. Thank you for listening on this Wednesday. We'll catch you in 48 hours for a Friday edition of the pod to wrap up the week. God bless. Garcia out.
You've been listening to Crimson and Blue Chips with John Garcia Jr. Be sure to listen in again Friday. Until then, keep up with all the news on Twitter at CABCPOD.